And that's why it's so successful, because it offers you the a little bit of neuroscience and psychology, why we operate in social settings the way we do. And also they give you some recipes, and we have a list of 30 behaviors for every stage, so people can choose the ones that they resonate most with them, and then they start implementing. And this is where we see the results, no? Because
that's so useful. Actually, we could offer, please, dear viewers, leave us comments to this video. If you would like us to do another video with some of these strategies that are recommended, we could do a summary for you, because they are so powerful. Interview on how to change from within, we'll be very happy to see that Maria Luisa Engels is back. Very warm welcome to you.
It's a pleasure, Alexandra. I really love sharing some moments with you. It's always so much fun.
Same here, really, and a very warm welcome. I'm so happy that you came back. And today, dear viewers, we're going to share with you some really insightful tips by Maria Luisa on how to distinguish contexts that are psychologically safe from contexts that are not. Obviously, in reality, it's not that easy. It's not white or black, but we have some hints for you. And of course, Maria Luisa, as you have seen in the first interview, she's a neurochange solutions consultant, which means she can explain to you everything you need to know about how our brains work. And that is the key to managing self-awareness. So let's dive in. Let's get started. First of all, psychological safety. What is that phenomenon? We know to distinguish 4 stages. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yes. Psychological safety is a term that it's being used in the last times quite a lot. It's not that new. It's from the 90s. And Amy Edmondson was the one that first made the research paper showing the importance and the relationship between psychological safety and performance. Now, Timothy Clark, which is a PhD Oxford and professor and entrepreneur, he has created the 4 stages model of psychological safety, which is a framework that helps teams and companies to create environments of psychological safety in their cultures. And why is this important? Because psychological safety is like the foundation that helps people to create inclusion, learning, innovation, and contribution.
May I just add, sorry to interrupt you, but may I add, this is what Maria Luisa just told you there. This is the important thing. Why is this important? Everyone is going on in today's work world about diversity, inclusion, because if we haven't got the keys for creating an inclusive environment, what will happen? We will see more and more cases of the current epidemic, and we know all about it. It's a taboo, but it is there. We will have more and more cases about burnouts, people who have problems integrating, and other people who exclude other groups. So this problem that is there and that everyone has experienced in some way is very subtle, because in everyday life, it's not that apparent. So just to underline what you just said, it's a very, very timely and important topic. And everyone who is working somewhere in some context, doesn't have to be a large company, can also be small businesses, can be entrepreneurs like us, has to know about that. Because if we don't deal with that crisis of more and more people who are unhappy at the workplaces or with their work, where will this lead?
Thank you so much for these words that you just said, because psychological safety is really important. Basically, it is an environment where people can be their true self. They can be authentic. They can bring ideas to the table without fear of being criticized. They can learn from mistakes. They are allowed to experiment. And they have no fear of retaliation. And so we create with psychological safety environments where people are free to innovate.
And that is so powerful what you just said, because just imagine what that means. If everyone feels like that and feels the freedom to say their thoughts, to be themselves, and what kind of potential that creates for innovation, as you just said, it's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, we have to be able to learn from each other, but it's more important in those times because we're experiencing a huge speed of change. So we need to adapt quicker, faster. We need to innovate. We need to adapt. We have diverse teams. The first stage of psychological safety is always inclusion. And which is a human need. I mean, we have the right to be included. And one important thing that Tim Clark says is if we are not actively including, we are excluding by default.
That is also very important to know. Yes. So it is actually a responsibility of each one of us. It doesn't matter which role we have in our work life to include proactively, right? Not just saying, oh, no, it's my team leader's job.
Yeah, and and you demonstrate these acts, small acts of inclusion with everyday or activities like inviting people to speak up in a meeting or going to them and ask them, how are you doing? Integrating new hires or integrating your colleagues in conversations, paying attention that you include everybody in the email. Small things. So
these are good examples. Yes, they are very good examples. Can I just add, sorry to interrupt you, but can I just add also examples that are even smaller? Because I realized through my experience, and I guess you have the same, the micro actions are the ones that make a difference. For example, if you have a situation in a group and somebody joins the group, and you know that somebody in the group doesn't know the new joiner, can be from a different service or from a different environment, introducing those who don't know each other proactively, that could be such a micro action. Not introducing by saying, I don't know if this is relevant, can even in that micro action, it's not sometimes not even on purpose, but it can create feelings of those people who join, oh, I don't belong because I'm not being introduced here. So just another example.
No, there are plenty of examples of really things that we don't think they can create exclusion, but they can make a big difference because in that moment, these persons are entering a new group. The people in the group feel comfortable, so they are responsible to raise their hand to the newcomers.
Yes, and this is even outside the work context. This is very valuable. These things, by the way, dear viewers, we're sharing. This is valuable for life in general because we have all experienced this. The small movements that can change our feelings. So
yeah, it's not just about working environments. It's about any social setting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Inclusion is the first stage. The second stage is learner safety, which is that create environments where people feel free to learn, where people feel free to make mistakes and learn from that mistakes. If you don't foster that environments of learner safety, the consequence is the people will not dare to learn and fail. It will stop innovation, it will stop initiative. You will have a passive workforce, for example, where people don't dare to say anything or try anything new.
Yes,
it is very important.
Exactly. And we will say more in a minute what creates that, the telltale signs of when people start to feel anxious. But so that's stage 2. Then the next stage is also, it's very important.
Yes, it is a step beyond. It's contribution. It goes a little bit beyond, which is the ability to really actively contribute to the team, contribute to the group, giving your own input to help the team. You have to feel safe enough to do so, because it creates more.
And sorry, so that means contributing anything. That is important as well. Like you said at the beginning, being yourself means you can contribute even just a suggestion that might be in the end not useful, but you can contribute it without having fear of, oh, they might think that I don't know my stuff, without having that fear, just saying, could it be an idea that, and anything, just being yourself because you're a creative thinker, or like generally you think for the work, so you want to make a contribution, and you can say anything. That's another sign, right? That you don't self-censor yourself. Oh, what am I supposed to say? That shouldn't happen.
Of course, and it implies that there's an environment of respect where people are listening to what you're saying without judging, without interrupting. There's active listening, there's interest. So this has to be guaranteed. And as you can see, there's a natural progression. So inclusion has a lower psychological safety than learning, than contribution. And then we come to the fourth one, which is challenger safety, which is one that really where people feel so safe that they can challenge the status quo. So they can question things, the way the things has been done maybe for years, and say, okay, let's try something different. What if we do this and that with a high risk of failing? That's why these environments need the highest protection. And you can see we cannot build challenger safety without building safety, psychological safety in the other 3 levels before. So it's a natural progression. And it's important to say that these are human needs, because all people want to be included, all people want to learn, all people want and need to contribute in a social setting, and all people want to challenge, want to innovate, want to do things differently. So
and exactly, the last stage is so important. All people also want to challenge, not because they are, by the way, we have to define what we mean by challenge. Challenge here doesn't mean deconstruct in a negative way. Challenge means all people want to improve. So if you're at your workplace, you might see something in your environment that, oh my God, if we just improve this, we will work together much better, or we produce a much better outcome. And that we mean by challenge in a constructive way to actually improve the group outcome. Because I hear the viewers saying, so what does challenge mean? Does that mean each time saying, no, revolution, I'm against everything? That is not what we mean. We mean this respectful, constructive challenge that actually brings an organization or team further.
Exactly, that's that kind of challenge. It's not like the opposite rebel.
Yeah.
No, we don't mean that. It's a really grounded challenge to genuinely discover if there is a better way to do things, because at the end everything is changing all the time, so we need to adapt all the time.
Yeah, and that needs this critical thinking, critical in a constructive way. I've even read something recently. There's also literature out there now about how to healthily be even a rebel, but a healthy, constructive rebel. That also is good. It depends on the tone, of course. I mean, that's a whole nother video of how you say it then, and how you constructively and respectfully maybe disagree and say, oh, hang on, are we sure we're on the right path? Because I've seen that actually if we take this path, we might be much more effective or whatever, or it might be healthier.
Summarize the 4 stages framework helps people to progress through these 4 stages by implementing very specific and simple behaviors in their everyday work and life. And that's why it's so successful, because it offers you the a little bit of neuroscience and psychology, why we operate in social settings the way we do, and also they give you some recipes, and we have a list of 30 behaviors for every stage, so people can choose the ones that they resonate most with them, and then they start implementing. And this is where we see the results, no? Because
that's so useful. Actually, we could offer, please, dear viewers, leave us comments to this video. If you would like us to do another video with some of these strategies that are recommended, we could do a summary for you, because they are so powerful. Come, dear viewers, into a new environment and you're wondering, okay, so what are the telltale signs? How can I distinguish? Is this a healthy environment? So in general, there's no one such thing as a general healthy environment, of course. But there are certain little signs that you can look out for, that you can at least get a tendency of if the environment you're in is leaning more towards a healthy, psychologically safe environment, or if it's leaning more towards what we could call a tendency of a toxic environment. So what would you say, dear Maria Luisa, are these telltale signs?
Yes, sometimes it's not so easy. So you say it's so right, because the signs can be very subtle. And I think we will talk about this at the end. But you have the feeling in a psychologically safe environment that people are really interested in what you're saying and treat you with respect. They listen to what they say. They give you space, even if you're a new person. Another sign is that when people contribute, they are not punished, they are not criticized. Even if they don't share the opinion, but they just take it as a different point of view, which is so important. People engage in constructive dissent, which is the ability to disagree in a constructive way. And we see it in companies many times teams especially have a tendency to find consensus without disagreeing too much, because this friction. So we really don't want to have that friction. But on the other side, the cost is that we may not innovate, that we may not come with an innovative solution or different idea. So these are signs. Another sign would be there is empathy. There is diversity. There is also what I see, constructive feedback. So they give you candid.
People look out for each other. That's so important. Exactly. If you feel the others, I mean, first of all, you need to have that feeling. You just reminded me of something, or of that the others really look out for you, and you also need to have that feeling of being responsible for the others, right? That is so powerful. If you have that feeling, that's a huge tick on the list of psychological safety.
Yes, and there's an important difference. Maybe is the team is more important than any individual in its own. So because you recognize that everything is about teamwork, and you only can create more value if you work together as a team. And that's why you want to support others in your team.
So this feeling of togetherness and still respecting each other's opinion, actually also respecting that each person of the team has to work on his or her own, of course, as well. But that what you just described is that feeling of mindfulness and respect for the team and the group first. So also people, another sign also that I experience is a wonderful sign. If people start to look out for each other, if somebody, for example, somebody in the team is especially tired on that day and can safely say it, and the others actually look out for him and say, okay, you're only on a 20% ratio today. We will make up for that. We will create the 80%. We'll step in for you. That's a huge sign. If you have that, you can stay where you are.
It's incredible. And we can learn a lot from team sports, from successful team sports.
Yes,
they
exactly.
have high level of psychological safety many times. And they care for the others when they have a bad shape, as you say, or they have some psychological problems. They support. They know exactly the tendencies of every individual member of the team, so they can really support.
And they don't take it as a weakness, they take it as a normal thing. We need to also start, that's part of this mindset we want to highlight today. It's actually, we need to start to normalize that. We're human beings working together, so it is normal that not everyone will be every day in his or her top form. It's normal. We get tired, or we have bad days, so let's look out for each other, and also let's have that environment where we can say it. Yes. So these, what we said before, when we talked about where does that sometimes come from, that self-censorship, when we feel anxious about saying something, well, it comes from the opposite state where you just said at the beginning, when somebody actually gets into an environment where you feel, oh, I'm being punished for saying openly that I'm weak, for example. Yes.
And one important maybe sign of a psychological safety environment is the role model of the leader, that behaving. So that behavior, like sharing vulnerability, saying that they made a mistake, taking responsibility for that, learning from that mistake. So because
exactly
have these mirror neuron systems, if the leader does this first, then the team will start doing the same thing.
And even more complex, if I may add, in today's teams, usually there are more than one leader. So the co-leadership idea, it means also playing this nice game, as you just compared wonderfully with sports, this nice game of playing the ball to each other, because there are more than one experts for a certain topic. So also knowing when to follow. Okay, this is now the expertise of my teammate and the other co-leader of the team. So I play the ball to him or to her. And so I follow in that moment. And then my turn to lead will be later. And that's very important, because if we don't do that, we get people starting to compete.
Yes, and you know, one thing when I was listening to a podcast by the Neuro Leadership Institute, they have this practice that they share every month the mistake of the month. So
brilliant!
Yes, it's funny. Brilliant. Every employee has to share the biggest mistake they made a month, starting by the boss. Yeah,
and that's great.
It's a nice way to start practicing that small acts of vulnerability.
Yes. So we said before, I think it was in the first video where we talked about changing from within, celebrate your small steps, your successes, but also celebrate your mistakes. We learned from that. Exactly.
And not only you, all the others, because you're sharing them, and many people have the same mistakes. So
Yes.
it's great.
And as we move slowly into the era of artificial intelligence that is here to stay, dear viewers, we have all realized, we realize more and more what makes us so lovable and so unique as human beings, because we have these wonderful mistakes. They are great, the mistakes. That makes us humans.
Yes.
Okay, and final question for this really passionate topic. Now, how can we distinguish then those lovely, psychologically safe environments from those that have a tendency to go into what we would say, oh, that's a toxic one with lots of anxiety, where you don't feel safe to say anything, where you, as you said, you feel like, oh God, maybe I will be punished if I say a mistake. How can we, what would you say, what is the characteristic of those organizations?
I mean, among all the environments where there is a lack of psychological safety, there are many differences. Sometimes clear toxic environments, you can immediately perceive, you can immediately see where people are being bullied, maybe, being criticized openly, so nobody is able to open their mouth because they will know the consequences. These are predictable. You know how to behave. And in the best of the cases, the best thing is you cannot change the environment, leave that social setting.
Yeah, that's the extreme case. That is when you have to leave, when you can feel it already that nobody dares to say a thing, leave that environment.
But most of the times, we have that nice environments, but they're not psychological safe. So we have like a layer of politeness above, but it doesn't mean that we're including, it doesn't mean that we're allowing people to learn and challenge and innovate.
Now, this is where it gets tricky and where it gets very subtle, because from the outside, you might perceive these organizations, as you said, as nice. They might be even branded as nice because they have a social cause or a nice raison d'être, a reason for being. But how do we distinguish?
Yes, and you say there, most of the case are companies or organizations that do volunteering or healthcare or education. We had at that benevolent purpose or sustainability, things like that. And just because they have this purpose, you just think they are good and they behave good. But sometimes what happens is this is a killer for psychological safety in many cases, because people misunderstand or mix or interpret nice with inclusion, for example.
Wow, that
Just
is where
being
it gets
polite,
really
just being
interesting.
nice, it doesn't mean you're really including. You might maybe exclude in a very subtle way, not inviting people in the email. Now, what is the point with these nice cultures? They avoid consistently conflicts. They want to be nice, they want to be polite, so they will not give direct and candid feedback. This may create a conflict.
And that constructiveness, as we described it before, that actually you feel psychologically safe, remember the stage 4, to say, oh, I have a suggestion, could we go a different way? That doesn't really happen. That is what you're saying, right? It doesn't really happen. So everyone is rather nice and quiet about it. You don't engage in feedback.
Yes. For example, leaders that are growing up in these nice cultures, they have been educated maybe to be very nice and polite and great motivators maybe for their teams. But when something goes wrong, they don't keep the people accountable, because it would mean they have to confront that people. It's a conflict. Another thing that happens in nice cultures is that the best talent will not stay at the company, because the best talent is the one that really wants to make a difference. So they want to challenge.
And they will move.
Welcome. So, and this is a killer. Decision-making is slower. Change is slower. So they have slower innovation, slower adaptability. And these are the things. It doesn't mean that you have to stop being nice if you want to be psychologically safe. No, you can have both.
They don't, exactly. They don't exclude each other, but what we are saying here, and this is really, really important, is the niceness of people or of organization doesn't mean psychologically safe. That is a very important thing, because psychologically safe means also having a very healthy conflict, for example. Conflict in a healthy, respectful way, without attaining the personality of people, just talking about the subject and disagreeing respectfully, can be a huge sign of a good culture where you are safe. But it doesn't mean... So this niceness is sometimes, as you said, it's getting off track, right? It's then too nice, and then we're in the groupthink arena. So groupthink is something where people constantly watch each other. Okay, who is going to make the first move? I'd rather not say anything because we have to be all nice.
Yes, and you see it, for example, when there's a town hall meeting and the CEO is giving some speech and so on, they are all nice, and he says, does anybody has any questions? And nobody says anything. But then when the meeting is over, they all go in groups to drink a coffee, and they criticize everything that he said.
Yes.
So this is
that's
one
a good sign.
Yeah. So this is one example of nice but low psychological safety.
Yes. Because usually if there are people saying then, oh, hang on, I loved your contribution, thank you for that, can I ask you a question about? That is a sign that there's openness possible.
Yeah, and it has to start with the leader. So speaking up the truth, what is really going on, creating respectful environments so that really people feel safe to say what their opinion is. And this is how it starts. And sometimes it's very difficult to change a culture. We all know this because it had been going for so long. And there is a power game, yeah? So it's really, people just want to please the people.
Yes.
So you will not, it puts you in a position of danger if you challenge that.
There's this other perspective that we can apply to the same phenomenon, which is the perspective of the power relationship. So that would be yet another video in terms of, we didn't touch on that today, but dear viewers, we hope to have shown you some interesting insights into that concept of psychological safety, because it's important to know about that. And as you know, it's all about our mindset. First of all, handling ourselves, managing our own, how do we function? But then also it's very important to know how an organization ticks and what are the signs that maybe an organization is right for you. So we hope to have made a contribution, and please leave us comments if you want to get some more practical helps, tips and tricks, what to say, how to behave to create psychologically safe environments. And also a huge great thank you to you, dear Maria Luisa. That was excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being with you, Alex, as usual. And
Thank
thank you for your amazing contributions.